Coming up on Network Africa, Pope Francis pleads for migrants in his Christmas message at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Chad's President Idris Deby reshuffles cabinet, appoints Abdoulaye Fadoul as Minister of Finance. South Sudanese government and rebels resume hostilities as ceasefire fails. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. Pope Francis has urged Roman Catholics not to ignore the plight of millions of migrants during Christmas Eve Mass at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, driven from their land, especially African migrants, as he made defense of migrants around the world a major theme of his papacy. The pontiff compared them to Mary and Joseph, recounting the biblical story of how they traveled from Nazareth to Bethlehem but found no place to stay. Pope Francis, celebrating his 5th Christmas as leader of the world's 1.2 billion Roman Catholics, led a solemn mass for about 10,000 people in St. Peter's Basilica, while many others followed the service from the square outside. The Pope is set to give his traditional Urbi et Orbi. Let's take a closer look at this. Human rights activist Olatunji Lanre-Baruwa joins us on the program. Glad to have you on Network Africa.
Oh, thank you for having me. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too, Larry. All right, let's get more on the Pope's message. He urged Roman Catholics not to ignore the plight of millions of migrants driven from their land. What do you make of this plea?
Oh, it's vintage Pope Francis. It's been his message for years now. I remember 2015, sometimes in September, I think it was in the joint section of the U.S. Congress. Pope Francis delivered a message that caused tears to flow on the floor of the Congress. I remember Marco Rubio crying during that message. And I remember, you know, he pleaded with people to embrace migrants. Besides so many other issues, he talked about drugs, he talks about harm deals, he talks about, you know, family, he talks about abortion. But on migrants, he emphasized the need for the West to open his arms. And if you look at his story, Pope Francis also is like the 3rd generation from a family of migrants. He talked about his grandfather and father being Italians who emigrated to Argentina in those days. And then that if they had been rejected, he could have been like any other migrants. So it's always been his message. He has been emphasizing compassion. At some point, Pope Francis has also pleaded with parishes of Catholic churches across Europe to accommodate as much as 4 migrant families. And I learned that the Vatican has about 2 families of migrants that are under their cover, that they are, you know, catering for. So the message is actually apt for the season. And it's something the rest of the world needs to listen to and take to heart. He has always been the champion of compassion. And I know that one of his key messages also the revolution of tenderness. And when you look at Pope Francis, he has actually revolutionized the office of the Pope in the Catholic world, because he has gone out of his ways so many times. I've seen Pope Francis wash the feet of migrants. He has embraced so many. He talks about hope a lot, and this message is excellent, and I think people should take heed to it.
Right. He spoke about, people being driven from their homes, especially from Africa, where, unfortunately, violence and instability have been the norm, for instance, in the Kasai region of Congo. What do you think is the cause of all this unrest? And do you think, a call like that, from the Pope can actually help, restore peace in the regions?
Oh, no. There's no magic wand in the call by Pope Francis. You have to look at the countries that are contributing the largest number of irregular immigration presently right now. If you look at those countries, you will see the pattern, you will see the social decadence in those places. You will also see unrest and conflict. And those are the issues that need to be taken care of. It will take multilateral and as well as very decisive steps by leadership of those countries. And when we look at Africa in the sense, like, if you look at Nigeria, for instance, we have, people are not taking note of the fact that Anglophone Cameroonians are also flooding into Nigeria right now. And we are going to have similar trend if we are not careful with Togo, with the unrest that has been raging in Togo. If you move from Togo, you get to Burundi, you get to DRC Congo, like you mentioned earlier. So the call by Pope Francis will not halt the social exclusion, the economic problems in those countries, until those countries are able to provide jobs for young and able men, young and able youth within their own countries. It will continue to have this kind of drift, this urge to go through the irregular routes. Nigeria, for instance, we've tried. I think government can do a lot more by trying to also stop people from moving. But when you see the conflict in all this is also that you have to deal with the freedom of movement for people within the ECOWAS region, within the African Union. If you have a passport of a country, you should be allowed to flow and move within all those countries. But that's the issue we have to deal with. But countries have to raise up leadership. They also have to be able to, cater for their people, provide jobs for the youth, and play down and do everything to reconcile people, do everything to bridge the gaps between warring tribal regions and ethnicities. And that has been, an albatross for African countries. The ethnic divisions is huge, and it will keep continuing and leading to new crises if we are not careful. The call by the Pope will not stop the rate of migration at the moment, but I think for countries who are the destination countries, it's a message that they need to hear, and then it will require them also to improve the condition around the camps, improve the condition, the way they receive the migrants. It's a problem for everybody.